finally posted by John David Anderson. All right, guys, finally time for the reading of Posted. I push my way through the buzzing mob and freeze, heart struck, dizzy. It takes me a minute to really get what I'm looking at. Notes, at least 100 of them, pressed all over a freshly painted locker. Some clump together, overlapping like roof shingles. Others orbit like satellites, reaching up toward the wall. They vary in color, pale blue, fluorescent pink, lime green. But most of them are yellow, like dandelions before they fluff white and wither away. I stand motionless and read a few of them softly enough so only I can hear. They are just words, and they are not just words. I think about everything that's happened. About Bench and Dee Dee and Rose and Wolf. About all the terrible things that were said. About the things that should have been said and weren't. There had been a war. This was where it ended. I can't tell you exactly when it changed, when it spiraled out of control like a kite twisting in the wind, when it stopped being something funny and clever and became something else. Maybe there was no single moment. Maybe underneath all the squares plastered on the walls and the notebooks and the windows, there was the same message over and over. We just ignored it because it was much easier to stomach. And now I'm standing here dumbstruck, wondering if this changes everything. I know what you're going to say, sticks and stones and broken bones, but words can kick you in the gut. They wriggle underneath your skin and start to itch. They set their hooks into you and pull. Words accumulate like cancer, and they eat away at you until there's nothing left. And once they are let loose, there really is no taking them back. Truth is, I can't tell you exactly when it changed. I can tell you how it started, though, and I can tell you how it ended. I will do my best to line up the dots in between, and I'll leave you to draw the line. Chapter 1, The Catalyst. It started with Ruby Sandals. That's her name, swear to God. Ruby freaking Sandals. Yes, sandals aren't slippers, which would have been worse. And it's not even spelled the same, but it still counts as a form of child abuse in my opinion. Might as well just fix her black hair into a permanent ponytail, buy her a shaggy terrier and stuff it into a wicker basket. Teach her how to sing about rainbows. I'm sure her parents thought they were being cute with that name, but a thing like that could mess up a kid for life. It didn't, though. Mess up her life, that is. But only because Ruby, looking nothing like the lost farm girl from Kansas, with her dark brown skin and tight jeans, Ruby was no Dorothy. And she was hard-nosed enough to stare down anyone who even thought about teasing her. Which was always somebody. This was middle school. Everybody got teased by somebody, sometime about something. At the very least, Ruby would give back double what she got. You had to admire that. Don't get the wrong idea. Ruby and I weren't friends. I'll just say that up front. In fact, you can just assume that anyone I talk about isn't a friend of mine unless explicitly stated otherwise. Ruby was just a girl who sat in front of me in math class and ignored me out of habit. She had a backpack covered in faux sapphires. You didn't have to look close to tell the dark blue stones weren't real. This is Branton, not Beverly Hills. Anything flashy around here is fake. That's Branton, Michigan, by the way. Don't try to find it on a map. You'd need a microscope. It's one of a dozen dinky towns north of Lansing. One of the few that doesn't sound like it was named by a French explorer. Branton, Michigan. Population, not a lot. And yet, still too many I don't particularly care for. We have a shopping mall with a JCPenney and an Asian fusion place that everyone says they're dying to try, even though it's been there for 3 years now. Most of our other restaurants are attached to gas stations, the kind that served rubbery purple hot dogs and sodas in buckets. There's a statue of Francis B. Stockbridge in the center of town. He's a Michigan state senator from the prehistoric times with a beard that belongs to Rapunzel's twin brother. He was born in Branton, of course. Nobody important was ever born in Branton, but we needed a statue for the front of the courthouse, and the name Stockbridge looks good on a copper plate. That's all for show. Branton's the kind of place that tries to pretend it's better than it really is. It's really the kind of place with more bars than bookstores and more churches than either. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's a place where teenagers still sometimes take baseball bats to mailboxes, and wearing the wrong brand of shoes gets you at least a dirty look. It snows a lot in Branton, like avalanches dumping from their sky, like heaps to hills to mountains, the plows carving their paths through the neighborhood, creating alpine ranges nearly tall enough to ski down. Some of the snowmounds are so big you can build houses inside them, complete with entryways and coat closets. Restrooms are down the hall on your right. Just look for the streaming yellow hole. There's nothing like that first Branton snow, though. Soft as a cat's scruff and bleach white, so bright you can almost see your reflection in it. Then the plows come and churn up the earth underneath. The dirt and the boot tracks and the car exhaust mix together to make it all ash gray, almost black, and it sickens your stomach just to look at it. It happens everywhere, not just Branton. But here, it's something you can count on. But I was telling you about how it started, the ban and the notes, and then the war that followed. I was telling you about Ruby Sandals getting into trouble, getting us all into trouble. And just so you know, this isn't Ruby's story. She was what my chemistry teacher calls a catalyst, something that jumpstarts a reaction. The thing about Ruby, like pretty much every other kid at Branton Middle School, me being the one exception, is that she was never without her phone. Despite the rule against having them out in class, nobody followed that rule. If teachers' backs were turned, text, tweets, and ticked-off birds were flying. Videos were being downloaded, villages were being raided, and walls were being posted on. Everyone did it, and if I was lucky enough to have a phone, if it ever fit into the budget, I would have done it too. Which is why it wasn't unusual to see Ruby taking furtive glances at her lap during class. The problem was, on this day, she decided to do it in math with Miss Shears. Unlike Ruby, don't ever call me Dorothy Sandals. Miss Shears lived up to her name, sharp as a scalpel, with thin lips and dagger eyes. Nothing escaped her. She wasn't like Mr. Hostler, nearsighted and 3 years from retirement, only really concerned with getting home and finding out who won Dancing with the Stars. You could come to class newborn naked, and Mr. Hostler would probably just sigh and check you off the attendance sheet. Miss Shears, on the other hand, was a bloodhound. That didn't make her a bad teacher necessarily, but she wasn't the sort to look the other way when she saw the flash of light glinting off Ruby's phone, or heard the nearly imperceptible click of Ruby's painted nails on the screen. She zeroed in on the desk like a sniper. Then she snapped her fingers and opened her hand. "Let's have it." "Have what?" "The phone, Ruby." "I don't have a phone," Ruby said, sounding suddenly Dorothy-like, all innocent as she attempted to slide the phone she didn't have into her glitzy bag. It caught the edge of the pocket and clattered, which was much too loud, to the ground. Naturally, this was hilarious, at least to everyone but Miss Shears, who shot down the aisle and reached for it, hawk-like, snatching it from Ruby's underlying fingertips. "Give me my phone back," Ruby said, her face suddenly flushed. lunging upward as Miss Shears held it out of her reach. "You don't have a phone," Miss Shears reminded her. She looked at Ruby's screen and her expression changed, Jekyll to Hyde. If it was possible for a teacher to be pretty, Miss Shears might qualify. But when she looked at the screen, her face transformed into something pinched and contorted, like she had just taken a swallow of rancid milk. She looked from the phone to Ruby and then back to the phone. Ruby's eyes fell to her desk, head dropping so fast you would have thought somebody tried to anchor to her chin. "Is this..." Miss Shears stammered. "Did you..." Judging by the lack of response, the rest of us could only assume that it was, and she did. About a half-dozen students, me included, telescoped our necks to get a look at that screen, but Miss Shears pressed the phone close to her chest. We all turned and looked expectantly at Ruby, waiting for her comeback. Sarcastic or apologetic, it could go either way. I found that kids will apologize instantly if they think that it will keep them out of trouble. I know I will. But there are sometimes you just know an apology, even one you actually mean, won't be enough. Then it's best just to keep your mouth shut. Guessing that's what Ruby Sandals was thinking, because she didn't say a word at first. She just blushed and refused to look up. Miss Shears took a deep breath. "You understand we need to go see Mr. Whittingham." Low murmurs among the class. The big ham. Principal Whittingham was even more hardcore than Miss Shears. You could sometimes feel the tremors when he shouted at a kid from behind his office door. Ruby's head snapped up. "But Miss Shears, I didn't mean anything by it. It's just talk." She knew she was in it deep. I suddenly felt bad for her. Miss Shears had her Gorgon stare on. "Turn you straight to stone," the phone still pressed to her heart. "This isn't a game, Ruby. It's one thing to violate school policy and use your phone in class. But this..." Miss Shears looked at the phone again as if to confirm that what she'd seen the first time wasn't a trick of her imagination. Her face knotted up again and she shook her head. "This is inexcusable." Which meant, whatever it was, it must have been good. Ruby Sandals groaned and angrily stuffed her notebook into her pack. Then we watched her be escorted to the front door. "I will be back in 2 minutes," Miss Shears warned. "Take this opportunity to complete the problems on your sheet." Silently. We all nodded meekly. Miss Shears closed the door, and at least 20 other phones flew out of their pockets and backpacks as we all tried to figure out just what it was Ruby had done, the wonderfully terrible things that she'd said. Behind me, Jasmine Jones squealed and clasped her hands over her mouth. She showed her phone to Samantha Bowles. Not Bowles. I made that mistake only once. "Oh no, she didn't," Samantha said, eyes wide. Apparently, yes, she did. And we were all about to pay for it. I said Ruby wasn't my friend, and she wasn't, but that doesn't mean I didn't have any. In fact, for a while there, I thought I had just enough. Nobody is friendless. I honestly believe this. We all have somebody. Even the crazy lady who lives down the block from us has her pet schnauzer. Though the thing is uglier than she is, with a snaggletooth and a gimp leg. Even my father, an editor for an online magazine who works out of his lonely one-bedroom apartment near the beach and thinks humans generally suck, even he has real-life people who he talks to. My mother's just not one of them. Point is, none of us is alone. We might feel alone sometimes, but more often than not, we are just lonely. There's a difference. We aren't alone because it's basic human nature to band together. Herd mentality. We are programmed to find our people. That's how my mother put it, right before my first day at Branton Middle School. a little over 2 years ago.